judge in our lives? Can we judge anyone really? Everyone is a collection of experiences and habits and behaviors which are formed over so many years. Do we really understand where people are coming from? And without that understanding, can we judge anyone really? And it brings us toward the main question of today, which is there a right degree of tolerance which we should practice in our lives? So for this, I want to welcome Subhash Chandraji. We're going to be talking today about this concept of tolerance through the medium of the ancient science of Vihangam Yoga, which was brought to the world and distilled through the experiences of Anand Sri Sadhguru Sadafal Deji Maharaj, the master of spirituality and the master of Vihangam Yoga. So first I want to welcome Subhash Chandraji. Subhash Chandraji is an actuary by profession. He's based in Singapore, and he's been working at a multinational company for the last 6 years in Singapore. He's also a trainer of Vihangam Yoga and one of the founding members of Vihangam Yoga Singapore. So I wanted to welcome Subhashji first. I hope you can hear me clearly, Subhashji.
Thank you, Avinoji. Yes, I can hear you very well.
Awesome. Lovely. So, today we're talking about a very important concept of tolerance, and just to kind of set the scene so that we can have a conversation where we're all on the same page. How would you, Subhashji, for all of our listeners, define what tolerance actually is? How do we define what tolerance means?
Thank you very much, Avinoji. I'm quite glad and fortunate enough once again to be one of the speakers for this session on this platform. I hope, as you rightly mentioned, everyone understand the word judgment is very important. Subjectivity is another word which is very important when we talk about tolerance. But before that, I think it is good to define a couple of things when we discuss the word tolerance and its meaning. Probably we would link it with another term called patience also later on. But if I have to say at the initial time about this word tolerance indeed varies from person to person. It is not same thing for everyone, and the limit is different for everyone. When we have to define tolerance, it is, I can say it's mysterious and unfathomable in many respects. It is reflected with our belief, it is reflected with our practice, it is reflected with our surroundings, it is more reflected with what we work, how we work, our gender, our age, education. There are so many things around us based on which this tolerance can be defined. Basically, if I see the word tolerance, it basically is a testing point that something you don't like, something which is not happening as per your expectation, something which is different from what you think and you don't like it, it's not good according to your understanding, then this tolerance point starts. And it doesn't happen just at one time. It is basically an accumulation of something which is happening on a repetition basis. A very simple example, if I say, is suppose there is a grandfather and there is a grandson of his as well. He has been doing lots of nuisance at home, shouting, running here and there. It may be possible that the grandfather is a little bit tolerant at the beginning point because he thinks, okay, he's my grandson, he loves him, let him do whatever he's doing. He is trying to let him understand, don't do this, it disturbs people. But even thereafter, the grandson continues doing it without thinking too much what my grandfather is saying. It may be possible that the grandfather reaches to a tolerance limit, after which his own understanding, his own strength, his own behavior start changing. His the reception will change. He will start doing things in a different way. He will start feeling differently. His boiling point probably can change. With this simple situation where the repetition is happening and the person is not liking it all the times, whenever he is facing that, whether good or bad, that is different thing. But for that person, he doesn't like it because probably his body is not accepting it the way he wants to accept it. His mind is not accepting it the way he wants to accept it. And his own limit is not allowing him to accept it. And that's how the tolerance limit will be challenged in that respect. If I define tolerance in much more broader way, then this word tolerance should be defined not just by one word. There are multiple different words along with the word tolerance, which should be known and understood. If I name some of them, I can say there is one word which is called intolerance. Another one we can say hypertolerance. These are the two extreme points of the tolerance. If I explain intolerance basically result or it causes individuals to fail. Basically, it makes everyone and the people who is intolerant, it causes individuals to fail to tolerate something which they should tolerate. Means there is something which is happening around the person, which ideally on one particular frame, he should tolerate that, but he is not tolerating it. This will be considered as intolerance. On the other hand, suppose if I say hypertolerance. So hypertolerance is completely opposite of it, which means it actually gives or it is permitting that person in such a way that the point which he should not be permitted or he is praising it, which should be blameworthy or remaining silent towards injustice. So there are two words I'm defining here, intolerance and hypertolerance. Hypertolerance means you are tolerating, accepting, permitting all those things which actually is blameworthy and not in a justice form, but still you are accepting it. And intolerance is you are not accepting something which actually should have been accepted. These two extreme points arrive in each and everyone's life at one point or another for one thing or another. The most important thing is something lying in between, the real tolerance capability, which I say is a true tolerant point, which allows to be somewhere between these two endpoints of the continuum, the intolerance and the hypertolerance. So this truly tolerant point is basically, it gives us a positive allowance, but at the same time, it allows us critiquing negatively with the non-tolerance also. So when we talk about tolerance, we have to be very much judgmental at many points because again, these definitions also varies from person to person. When one particular thing has to be accepted, when one particular thing has not to be accepted, again, there is no any specific framework. I'm excluding right now the spiritual definition, but even in our normal life, there is no any specific framework based on which someone has to accept something, someone doesn't have to accept something. So it's as you rightly mentioned, Abhinavji, it's more on subjectivity, it's more on the judgment of an individual. But beyond all these, still, I believe the point tolerance is very important for everyone. Because if we are not tolerant enough, at the point when we have to be, means at the right time, in a right degree, if we are not tolerant enough, it simply irritates us, because of which our body language, our mental behavior, and our own understanding can change drastically and significantly, which further can disturb us for a long time. Abhinavji.
Yes, absolutely. And I think what you've just raised is something which we've all experienced. And if you're listening in, I'd encourage you to reflect on times when perhaps, someone has said something to you and you've reacted before taking a moment to think and to consider, their position. And then how to, it doesn't feel great afterwards. As Subhash said, you feel irritated. You feel like when you take a step back afterwards, you realize that you have injected this negative energy into that environment, and that, it just led to more discussions, more debate, more argument, and it just becomes a more painful process to try and get out of that state of energy into a more positive and constructive form of energy. And in this respect, the yogis have given us, and the spiritual sciences have given us a way to think about all this, which obviously we want to speak about more with Subhashi, which is we've heard of this term called vibes in our life, in our modern life, where if you're at work, there's a certain vibe. If you're at home, there's a certain vibe. And if we dig into that word, into that intuition of a vibe, really, what it's telling us is that there's a certain state of energy in a room or in a place. And, when things start to become more negative, let's say, when someone is angry at you, when someone is judging someone else, which they have no right to, when that starts to happen, then the negative energy in that room starts to bubble up and develop. And, the yogis have given us a word, a term, which Subhashi, I'm sure, will explain to us much more clearly, which is the word tolerance, right? In that state where things are becoming more difficult, where things are, becoming more negative, we have a decision we can take in what we want to do in that situation. And there's a great sentence from one of the great modern saints, which is, if you can just stay quiet when someone is angry at you, you are doing a seva being a selfless service. You are accepting that negative energy and you are not producing anything negative in return. And this is a very subtle science, and one which I want to dig into with you, Subhashi, which is, what is this science of energy, and, where does tolerance fit into the spiritual picture of interacting with people day to day?
Well, I think when we discuss about this word tolerance, I think, as I mentioned, it varies from person to person. But again, if we define a frame, and that frame is defined actually, that frame is defined universally for everyone. If we talk on that frame, let us keep that as a hypothetical frame right now. If we keep everyone on that hypothetical frame, then I believe the tolerance limit will also move towards that frame for everyone. And let me give a simple example of that frame. And that frame is, suppose, love. If we are loving people to everyone in such a way that we don't complain to someone, despite our tolerance is being tested, the situation will be different. If we consider love towards God, then the situation would be different. When we talk about tolerance, that means we are linking our inner capacity to a second person whose activity, whose behavior and other things probably doesn't suit to us. But if we consider everyone, suppose, as the creature or the creation of God, and there is no difference among each other, and everyone is our own, we love everyone to the most, this tolerance limit will reach to the maximum for everyone. But this situation, this framework is not true for everyone, because it is very, very hard and impossible almost for everyone to love everyone. It is not possible. So because of this diversity, because of these differences, definitely the tolerance limit is different for different person. But still, if I talk about the spiritual world, if I talk about the spiritual practices, if you talk about how yogis and how the people who are doing austerity and other things are behaving, doing things are different for them. It is now more linked to lots of inner qualities for that particular person as well. Tolerance is not an isolated characteristic. It is linked with many other characteristics of an individual as well. As you rightly mentioned, the angerness, the angriness, the anger, it is also linked with the tolerance. Patience is also linked with this tolerance. How egoistic you are, that is also linked with tolerance. Whether we are satisfied in our own life or not, that is also linked with tolerance. So it depends from what point, where we want to link our tolerance. And all these limits of individual would be defined on the basis of the inner quality of each of these individuals. If we are not soft, if we are always angry, if we are not satisfied in our life, if we are not satisfied with our relationship, if we are not satisfied in our working environment, our tolerance limit probably would be different. But on the other side, the people who are happy, the people who are satisfied in their life, people whose relationship is better, their tolerance limit would definitely be much more better than the other part. Avinaji.
Yes, absolutely. And then, you've touched on inequalities there, which is an important discussion to have, which is, the crux of how we can develop tolerance. And, the question for all our listeners is probably, when we're talking about inequalities and our tolerance is linked to many inequalities, how do we develop these inequalities? What do we need to do day to day to develop them?
So these inner qualities are very much known to most of the people, and we have been discussing about those inner qualities on this forum time to time as well. But in a nutshell, all these inner qualities are again linked to our mind. There are 4 inner organs we have, in along with 10 organs, sense organs and doing organs. We have mind, we have our intellect, we have our memory power, the chitta, and the ego. And all of those inner qualities which we are talking about, all these are linked with these inner organs. And the most prominent one is the mind, and then the ego. If we are able to control our mind, even to a certain extent, our tolerance limit will be different compared to when the mind is not controlled. Because this inner quality is very much linked to the mind. This mind actually makes us realize what is happening outside. Whether we are able to accept that the way we want to accept or not, that is also linked with our mind. As for a very simple example, suppose someone is doing something wrong on the street. Are we going to accept that immediately or not? Or it tests our tolerance limit? It depends on person to person, whether that person is seeing it for the first time, whether he has experienced this previously in different way or not, whether he has been involved in that incident or not, whether someone of his known person is involved in that incident or not. It depends on lots of factors. In that respect, how he has to react, how he has to take or accept at the time when something is happening in front of him would very much depend on his inner qualities. The inner qualities can be refined every time with the help of regular practice of controlling our mind, with the help of surrendership. When we are defining a specific framework, the love towards the God, we need guidance. We need a proper guidance. And here basically, Vihangam Yoga basically brings a very nice help to everyone, starting from how to control the mind, how to work on our ego, whether ego is required or not. If ego is required, to what extent it is required? If tolerance, to what extent we have to tolerate, how much we have to be patient. All these things will very much related to our inner quality, our inner tolerance as well. I'm defining tolerance in two ways. Many a times what happens is our tolerance is being tested what is happening in the outside. Outside means in this world. If something is happening in front of us, we hear something, we see something, and then it tests our tolerance limit. But at the same time, there is another tolerance limit which is inside us. Something is being seen, heard outside, and something is happening inside. If we are controlled inside, if our judgment, if our framework on which we are working is on right direction, then the inner tolerance will let you help how to behave outside, how to have your body language outside, and how to react outside on that particular incident, what is happening in front of you. So basically, what we behave outside, how we do it, how we tolerate outside thing is very much linked to our inner core, how we accept it, and how we know exactly what we are going to react for.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the key point there really is the hurt which we experience when we are in a situation where someone is speaking to us in a certain way or behaving in a certain way. That hurt or that pain is experienced within. And it is a perception which we have of that situation, as you just explained, Subhashi. And we have to overcome these perceptions and move more toward a truthful understanding of things. And I just wanted to share a small story from our own kind of Vedic philosophy. And I really wanted to reflect on this with Subhashi, which is the story of Maharshi Valmiki. Maharshi Valmiki, before being named or lauded as a Maharshi, he was a daku, a robber and a thief. And he would kill people in order to acquire their belongings and then to, distribute it amongst his family. His family was not aware that this was his job. And one day when he came across a sage whose name was Narad, Sage Narad asked him, he noticed that he was attacked by Maharshi Valmiki before he was a Maharshi. And he asked him, you're robbing others. I want for your family. I want you to ask your family, will they also partake in your sins? Are they happy to do that? And the Daku said, of course I can ask them. I'm sure they will be. When he went to meet his family and he asked them, this is what I do day to day. I'm a robber. I'm a thief. I kill in order to distribute and support this family. And he asked them, would you be willing to, take upon the sins which I am committing? His family refused. They said, no, like these are your actions. Why should we have to, deal with your actions? And then after that, the Daku, he became very sad. He didn't know what to do next. So he went back to the sage Narad, and sage Narad told him, in order to move forward from this point of your life, you have to meditate. You have to become more spiritual in nature. You have to go within. You have to do tapasya, which is meditation, for a long period of time. And Maharshi Valmiki, the Daku, he underwent on this quest, the spiritual quest, for many, many years, and finally was honored by the sage Narad as a Brahm Rishi, as a completely realized soul. And, in this arc of the story, this sage Narad, he could have easily judged Rishi Valmiki. He could have easily said, you are not worth this path to spirituality. You do not deserve this knowledge. But instead of doing that, he opened his hands to a person who did not know better at this point in his life, and he showed him the path. And this is where I wanted to reflect a bit, Subhashi, on, you raised the concept of hypertolerance, and on how, there's a balance between being tolerant and a balance between being angry, and there's a delicate nature to tolerance. And we've seen, in all the stories of spirituality, even in the verses of Swadhaved, we read how the master is extremely tolerant. And I wanted to understand with you, why is that the case? Why is a master so tolerant, even when a disciple may think another disciple doesn't deserve it? Why does the master still think that, can a disciple even make that determination, firstly? And secondly, why is a master so tolerant?
Thank you, Abhinavji, for this question. In fact, this is a very interesting question. If I have to say a few words on this, let me use a word instead of master here, a guru. We have used this word many times, Sadguru, guru. So I'm using the word guru right now for master. This is a Sanskrit word which is combination of two small words, or two letters, you can say, gu and ru. So gu means it is the darkness, and ru means which brings you towards the light. So guru means, in a normal way, if we define, it's the person or entity which eradicates your darkness and bring you towards the light, the divine light. On this definition, if I see, other than guru, if I take most of the people in this world, definitely everyone has some demerits, everyone has some bad habits, and no one is perfect, basically, in that respect. So guru, basically the master, knows who is what, and he understands what is this person's characteristic, what is this person's characteristic. In that respect, for a guru, for a master, in a way, every human being, every soul is basically same. He doesn't differentiate among different souls, because he sees not at the level of what you and I see for a person. He sees at a different level. So at that level, the master knows, I'm repeating, the master knows that the person has some demerits. One person has one specific type of demerit or one bad habit, or another person has another type of bad habit, which may not be linked with each other for 2% also. But the master knows about that. If the master knows who is at what level, he is the master who is going to take everyone and every individual towards the enlightenment. How can he differentiate among two people? He cannot. And if in that respect, if at all he has taken that responsibility to bring people from darkness towards the enlightenment, he has to be the entity, the person, in a way that he is ready to absorb everything. If the master cannot absorb, the demerits, the wrong habits, the bad habits of individuals, it is very difficult for the master to justify himself as the master. So it's the nature of an ocean which absorbs everything into it, good or bad. If it is not, that means we are doubting the depth. For a master, be it a good person in front of him or a bad person, he absorbs everyone into itself, because no one is perfect as he is. In that case, if he is not tolerant enough, if he's intolerant or or even say hypertolerance, it is very difficult to justify himself. So the universal law is everyone is same for him. Whoever is doing whatever is fine for him because he has that complete right, truly tolerance limit to absorb everything. And that's, I think, one of the specific characteristics which differentiate the master from any one of his disciples. He can absorb everything into itself. Avinash.
Yes, a beautiful explanation. And I think that's very important for us to consider as seekers on the spiritual path, which is, what are we capable of and what is our kind of domain? And as we kind of started this discussion from that great quote from Hermann Hesse, which I'll repeat just once more, which is, and give me just got it here, which is, it is not for me to judge another man's life. I must judge, I must choose, I must burn purely for myself alone. And, in this quote and from Subhash's explanation, what we start to understand is that we do not have the power or the means by which to judge other people. We only have the means by which to judge ourselves only. And that is where the line is drawn in the spiritual philosophy. Now, Subhashi, there is another question, which is, we also understand that sometimes the master or the guru, even in our own homes, our parents, our loved ones, sometimes they have to tolerate a lot of our, let's say, not very mature behaviors. And then at one point, as you mentioned, a limit is crossed and they have to take a decision. Like, should I remain tolerant or should I express a bit of anger in order to teach this person, perhaps? So when is enough enough? And how do we take a determination on whether we should remain peaceful and tolerant or whether we should become a bit more stern and help a person learn in a different way?
I think this depends on the objective. If I take a simple example of a parent, I have two kids, so I would like to explain this from that respect. Many times for a father or a mother or for both the parents, the situation arises in such a way that you have to take a call. You cannot ignore few things, but there is an objective. There is a fine objective behind this particular statement, and that objective is we want our kids to be in a right direction. If with that objective, if we show our tolerance in a different way, because sometimes if we have tried everything, nothing is happening. It happens sometimes. Nothing is happening and the kid is still not the way appropriate you want to be. Again, this is a judgmental call. I want to be, right? On that respect, if my kid is not going on that right direction, then sometimes you take a strong decision. You can scold your kid. You can tell them in a strong word, which will show actually that you have lost your tolerance or you have reached to your ultimate tolerance limit. But again, I'm repeating again, if this is not linked with a conscious objective, then this is not right. What I mean to say is, many a times, we are all human beings, right? Many a times, we are not able to differentiate what is the objective for which we are doing. Sometimes it may be possible that we don't know the real objective and we behave out of our own nature. A parent can be angry from his kid just out of nature. But at the other side, it may be possible that a parent is showing being angry to fulfill one of the objective, the conscious objective he has thought for his kid. So there is a difference between these two. If you have a conscious objective for which you are working, then sometimes you have to show your tolerance in a different way. Even a master also, many times master scolds his disciple. But that doesn't mean that he has a bad intention or he has lost his temper or he actually has reached to his tolerance limit. Probably we cannot say that because he's a master. But even if he has shown that particular activity there might be some conscious objective behind it. So unless and until we understand the difference between our own behavior, nature, and this conscious objective, differentiating the real tolerance is difficult. And it may be possible that sometimes that individual himself would not, as a parent, if I'm saying, it may be possible that at one point I may not be able to differentiate what I want. It may be possible that I'm acting, reacting just out of habit, because in my mind, back of the mind, I might have thought, oh, I am the one who is training my kid, which may be wrong, which may be wrong. So what I mean to say is, if we are working on a conscious objective, the tolerance limit would be very different. In my opinion, getting angry or getting irritated should be the last thing for anything. There are so many different ways based on which we can solve lots of things without getting irritated, without reaching to our ultimate tolerance limit. And again, all these things are linked to our inner core qualities, which in a way comes from the practice and from the blessings of the master. I would like to recite one couplet from Swarved, which I have noted. It is a very interesting couplet. I'll explain that in English as well. What it says in the fourth mandal, third chapter and seventh couplet: जल का सागर पास है पपिहा के किस काम, बूंद आश असमान किए भक्ति आश जनना. Which means there is a bird, I think it's a cuckoo, the bird. If at one time the bird gets hurt by, say, one hunter or someone, and the bird fell into a river where the bird now need definitely water to cure or to make himself better after that hurt. But interestingly, this bird doesn't take a single sip of water, despite the point that the bird requires the most at that time point, a sip of water. Why? Because the bird is practicing. The bird is testing its tolerance of the thirst to get the first drop of that Swati Nakshatra. I think that is the first dew in one specific environment, one specific weather. That cuckoo actually is very much determined to get the first drop of that Swati Nakshatra. And the bird is committed not to gulp any different type of water until he gets that first drop of water from the sky during that Swati Nakshatra. That bird is so determined. He is at a stake of his life, and the bird is into the river. But he's so determined, it is so determined that it doesn't want to take the water of the river. His desire, his objective, his practice, his tolerance, his austerity, and everything is just for that one droplet of the Swati Nakshatra from the sky. This testing is really very, very interesting. If we try to apply such kind of things in our life, it is only possible when someone is completely committed, surrendered, and determined to achieve what the person wants to achieve. And this is what the quality of a yogi also. A yogi is determined to one path, to achieve one thing in one direction under the guidance. Other than that, nothing is acceptable to that person. And anything comes to his way, it is testing his tolerance. But still, he continues on his own path. He continues on his own direction. This tolerance limit is very unique and comes from the quality of a yogi itself. For our life, in day-to-day life, probably we cannot be that determined being in our normal life. I don't know, it depends on person to person, but still, If we have examples in front of us, we still can be committed, we still can be determined under the guidance of the master.
Yes, a beautiful, beautiful message. And, I think as we start to wrap up our conversation, there's one more thing which I wanted to echo back to our listeners, which is a wonderful quote by a modern saint, which is, "I am a soldier whose killing is in killing my own self rather than killing someone else. My victory is taking the burden on myself rather than hurting others." And I think this encapsulates exactly what Subhash just expressed to us, which is this Doha from the Swarved of the bird, who, even though it is in pain, even though it is hurting, it does not act in a way which is putting itself first. It is putting others first. And it is instead working on itself and chiseling itself to become even stronger and stronger. And, I think this is the crux of our conversation today about what tolerance really is. And I just wanted to end on one question to Pashi before we wrap up and summarize, which is, how would you define the difference or the relationship between tolerance and patience? Just because a lot of us listening, we can see there's a correspondence between the two, but perhaps if we could just get a clearer kind of insight into this before we wrap up, that would be wonderful.
When the term patience comes, first thing I recall as an example, somebody saying, "Don't test my patience." If we are using the word patience in this way, I take this as same tolerance. Don't test my patience means actually the person is saying, don't test my limit, don't test my tolerance. If we use the word patience in this way, I would say tolerance and patience is same. But there is a huge difference between tolerance and patience as per my understanding. Patience, when we define, it's slightly different in a way that if you're patient enough, if you have the quality of being patient, having impatience, it doesn't boil you. It doesn't boil you to react the way we react when our tolerance limit is tested. The patience means, I take one example. Suppose we are doing something, one specific, hardcore, dedicated to finish one particular work, and that work is not finishing because it is dependent on lots of other factors as well. Now, whether we are tolerant here or we are patient here. If we are tolerant, that means something is occurring all the times, repetitively, which you don't like, and there is no measure for it, there is no cure for it, there is no solution for it, but you're trying. But when we talk about patience, it brings the softness along with that quality as well. You are not angry. You are not angry at that time point. You are still accepting it. You are testing your capability. And you are waiting for a result. You are trying to deliver something, and you are waiting something to happen. So if I have to differentiate tolerance and patience, I would say tolerance is more vibration, more vibrating, or in a different way, if I say it is more linked with your physical behavior. But patience is more the inner core quality. It gives you still more and more calmness, whereas tolerance tests our boiling point all the time. So the difference is, if you are patient enough, if you have a quality of patience, that means you are still calm and controlled. But if you have not reached to the tolerance limit, that doesn't mean that you are calm. You may be boiling inside still. You may be thinking a lot. Your body may react in a very different way, but still you are showing that you are calm. So if I differentiate quickly again, the difference between, according to my understanding, the difference between tolerance and patience is that patience brings lots of softness, calmness is still within. Maybe you are not very happy, maybe you are not very restful mood, but still you are believing in something that it will happen. You have that belief. But when you talk about tolerance, it is related with your physical behavior, related with the boiling point inside you have, which is different from the patience.
Yes, thank you for that beautiful message. And I also want to thank you, Subhash, for joining us this week. I think we've discussed a lot of things, and I think there's enough for us to reflect on as we go through the next week and we reconvene in the coming week. So thank you, Subhash, for joining us, and I hope to have more conversations with you very soon.
Thank you, Avinav.
Thank you. So let's go toward the Shanti part. This week, as we listen to and take in the Shanti part, I hope we can all put our hands together and think about the state of the world. I hope we can pray to the Master that we, in this very difficult and troubling time, we're all able to come together as a common humanity and help each other. So keeping that, thought in mind, let's go toward the Shanti part, and let's then go toward a quick summary of what we've learned today about tolerance. So just requesting once more.
विराग त्याग की शांति हो, उदासीनता शांति, सेवा जित शिष्य शांति हो, सत्य शांति हो शांति। हे प्रभु शांति स्वरूप हो, शांति शांतिमय शांति, शांति शांति जन शांति हो, पूर्ण शांतिमय शांति। हे प्रभु शांति प्रदान कर, दूर हो सर्व अशांति, देव सदा फल शांति में, शांति शांति सुख शांति। हे प्रभु शांति प्रदान कर, दूर हो सर्व अशांति, देव सदा फल शांति में, शांति शांति सुख शांति।
And with that, we've come toward the end of another week. This week, we talked about tolerance. And, tolerance gives us, and the definition and discussion we just had of tolerance, it gives us something to do for the coming week. We just have to reflect on what we are doing with our own actions. In the spiritual philosophy, in the world of spirituality, we recognize, as Subhashi explained, and as we discussed today, that each and every one of us have something we need to work on. But do we have the means? Do we have the right to judge anyone? The answer to this, if you're a spiritual seeker, is a resounding no. No matter how long you've been meditating, no matter how little you've been meditating, we have no right to judge another human being. That is only the right or the capacity of an all-realized master who understands our characteristics to the deepest level. The message of tolerance, to put it together in one sentence, is to endure difficult or hurtful circumstances with calmness, in the face of anger or wrongdoing, to remain calm, and to remain gracious towards those who have made mistakes in their lives. Spirituality is an ocean which encapsulates and accepts every single human being and living being in existence. If we truly are seeking the spiritual path, we must understand this to the deepest level. Without the message of tolerance, without the quality of tolerance, to say that we are spiritual in nature is to not understand what spirituality stands for. I'd like to end on just one small verse from the Swarved, which says, tolerance is to not give punishment for a fault or offense, even when one has the power to give punishment. This is known as tolerance. So I encourage you all, including myself, in the coming week to look at your own actions. Look at the way you're looking at other people in the world. Are you judging anyone? Are you being impatient with anyone? If that is the case, tolerance and the quality of tolerance might make things just a little bit easier. So with that, I'd like to end for this week. Once again, I hope you're all keeping safe in this very strange time in the world. And as we heard in the Shanti part, where we, in the feet of the Master, say to him, sing with him about every domain of existence, and we say, we pray for peace in every domain of existence. We end this week saying, please, Master of ours, and please all the saints and yogis of old and new, guide us, guide this world toward a state of peace and harmony. So with that, namaste, Jai Sudev, and see you once again at this time next week.